You're sitting on your couch. The TV's on, but you're not really watching it. Your phone is right there on the cushion beside you, screen dark, no buzz, no ping, nothing. You pick it up anyway. You unlock it. There's nothing new. You scroll for a second out of habit, find nothing worth reading, lock it again, and set it back down. 20 minutes later, you do the exact same thing. Then you do it again standing in line at the grocery store. Then again waiting for a kettle to boil. None of these moments had a reason behind them. Not one buzz. Not one banner. Just your hand moving before your brain had even decided to move it. You just checked in with a machine that had absolutely nothing to tell you. And some. Part of you is already planning to do it again before this sentence finishes. This video is about why you check your phone when there's no notification to check. By the end of this, you'll understand that the itch isn't really about the phone at all. It's about what your brain thinks might be waiting on the other side of that screen. Why that belief survives no evidence over and over, thousands of times a year, and what much older instinct is quietly running the whole show underneath it. Start with the phantom. In 2012, psychologist Michelle Drouin ran a study out of Indiana, University Purdue, University Fort Wayne, asking undergraduates about phantom vibrations, that sensation of your phone buzzing when it didn't. 89% of participants said they'd felt it. Not most people. Almost everyone. A good chunk reported it happening multiple times a week, sometimes daily. Some described patting their pocket, pulling the phone out, checking the screen, and finding absolutely nothing, then doing it again an hour later with the same false certainty. Your nervous system is so primed for a notification that it will manufacture one out of nothing, invent a buzz that never happened just to give you a reason to check. That's not a phone problem. That's a wiring problem, and the wiring doesn't care whether the signal is real. But here's where it gets interesting. Psychologist Larry Rosen at California State University, Dominguez Hills, spent years studying what he eventually named nomophobia, the fear of being without your mobile phone. In his research, he found that many people start showing measurable anxiety, including elevated heart rate and rising cortisol, within minutes of being separated from their device, even when nothing is happening on it. In one of his studies, participants were asked to sit quietly while their phones rang, unanswered, in another room. Their physiological stress climbed steadily the longer the phone stayed out of reach, not because they were missing information, but because they were missing access. Some participants described the sensation less like curiosity and more like an unscratched itch spreading slowly through their whole body. The phone doesn't have to do anything. It just has to not be near you. You're not addicted to the notifications. You're addicted to not being cut off from them. But here's where it gets interesting. This is where B.F. Skinner's old pigeons show up again, whether you like it or not. In the 1950s, Skinner ran experiments on what's called variable ratio reinforcement, rewarding an animal on an unpredictable schedule instead of a fixed one. Pigeons given a random chance of food peck the lever far more compulsively and far more persistently than pigeons who got food every single time. Predictable reward gets boring fast. Random reward gets obsessive, and it barely fades even when the food stops coming entirely. Some pigeons kept pecking thousands of times after the reward was removed for good, refusing to believe the well had actually run dry. Your phone runs on the exact same schedule. Sometimes checking it gets you a message, a like, a headline worth reading. Most of the time it gets you nothing. That inconsistency is the hook, not the notification itself. The notification is just occasional proof that the gamble sometimes pays off, which is exactly enough to keep you pulling the lever. But here's where it gets interesting. Deloitte's Global Mobile Consumer Survey has tracked phone checking behavior for over a decade, and 1 year's data found the average. Person unlocks their phone somewhere around 50 to 80 times a day, with heavier users clocking well over 100. Researchers who've studied the timing of these checks have found a huge chunk of them happen with zero prompting. No buzz, no banner, no lock screen alert. Just a hand reaching into a pocket out of pure habit. The way you might check your watch in a room with no clock on the wall, or glance at a rearview mirror on an empty road out of nothing but reflex. The notification became optional a long time ago. The behavior kept going without it, running on autopilot long after the original trigger stopped mattering. The habit outlived the reason it was built for. But here's where it gets interesting. Neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky, in his work on dopamine at Stanford, has pointed out something that trips a lot of people up. Dopamine doesn't spike when you get the reward. It spikes in anticipation of the reward, in the stretch of uncertainty right before you find out whether something's there. Checking your phone isn't the payoff. Checking your phone is the moment your brain gets its hit, whether anything is waiting or not. Which means the empty check isn't a failure of the system. It's the system working exactly as designed, because the chemical reward was never tied to the outcome in the first place. It was tied to the not knowing. You're not checking your phone to see if something happened. You're checking your phone because the checking itself feels like something happening. But here's where it gets interesting. There's also a social layer underneath all of this. Sociologist Sherry Turkle at MIT has spent decades studying how constant connectivity changes the way people relate to solitude, and her interviews with hundreds of phone users turned up a common thread. Many described a low hum of anxiety about being unreachable, a sense that somewhere someone might need them and not be able to get through. Checking the phone with nothing on it isn't just a dopamine loop. It's also a quiet reassurance ritual, confirming again and again that you haven't been forgotten, that the silence is just silence and not the sound of something going wrong. A few of Turkle's subjects even admitted they felt a strange discomfort during long stretches without checking, not because they expected anything, but because the checking itself had become how they measured whether they were still, in some small way, part of things. That's a heavier reason than habit. It's a small, repeated check against the fear of being unneeded. Here's the part that's harder to sit with. This isn't really about phones, and it wasn't built by any one app trying to trick you specifically. It's an old, generic reward circuit, the same one that kept your ancestors checking a tree line for movement or a horizon for weather, pointed at a device that can generate an infinite number of maybes a day, every day, forever. The phone didn't invent the itch. It just gave the itch something to scratch every few minutes instead of every few hours, and wrapped that scratching in a design built by people whose entire job is making the scratch feel a little better each time you do it. Design teams at major platforms have openly discussed, in interviews and internal talks over the years, engineering exactly this kind of unpredictability into feeds and notifications, because uncertainty keeps people opening the app more reliably than certainty ever could. And the uncomfortable question isn't, why do you check your phone for nothing? It's what all that leftover vigilance was originally built to do, back before there was a screen to aim it at. And what happens to that instinct now that it never gets to rest, never gets to conclude, never gets to just be finished checking? So, you're back on the couch. TV's still on, phone's still dark, still silent, still sitting there with nothing to say. And you reach for it anyway, not because you expect something, but because some ancient, unbothered part of your brain still thinks it's worth one more look. Maybe that's the honest version of being human, not waiting for the world to tell you something new, but never quite able to stop checking if it did.